Welcome to episode 4 of Mendocino Rendezvous. This was to be the last day to share time with Mark. I'd follow him south to our planned departure point, then head northeast to an appropriate stopping point on my way back to Montana. Just where that point would be, I hadn't yet decided. After some breakfast in town, we rode south out of Fort Bragg down the California coast.
Well, we're heading south out of Fort Bragg Sunday morning, and I'll follow Mark down 128 for a short ways to Boonesville. Then I'll split off and head east, and Mark will go south and head back for Portola Valley, and hopefully I'll make it to Winnemucca or maybe even beyond. We'll see how the old man's stamina is. Stay tuned.
From Highway 1, we'd ride southwest on California 128 to the Highway 253 intersection. A few miles down the road, Mark stopped briefly to adjust his new glasses. I had shut down the KTM, but when I switched the key back on, the dash was completely dead. Yet, the bike started and ran fine. Since I had the GPS to gauge my speed, I figured I'd wait until we arrived at our departure point and check it out. In Boonville, we pulled to the side to have a look at the non-functioning dash. All the fuses seemed in working order, however. Mark suggested disconnecting the ECU and reinserting the connector. Lo and behold, when the key was switched on, everything was back to normal. Issue solved.
Well, we're at our breaking off point here pretty soon. Mark's headed south and I'm headed east. And lo and behold, we were able to fix the dash problem. How we did it, I'm not real sure, but we did a lot more work than what we had to, I can tell you that. I think it was just a loose connection of the coupler to the ECU or some other coupler. Found out that I indeed need to get a set of Torx drivers to put in my toolkit. Note to self, buy more tools.
The road led us past beautiful vineyards
Lots of vineyards down here.
and apple orchards until our parting ways at California Highway 253. With a wave goodbye to Brother Mark, I turned to run 253 east to Highway 101.
And we're on our own. 253 looks like it should be a good road according to the map. Maybe some twisties here and there.
253 is a great two-lane that winds through the hilly countryside.
Oh yeah, this is a beautiful little road.
After a very enjoyable ride through the hills, I continued east on my way to Reno, Nevada. Riding north on 101, I looped up around Lake Mendocino. Reaching Williams, California, I encountered a little traffic congestion, slowing my roll.
Well, this isn't a lot of fun. Stop and go California traffic.
But the congestion wouldn't last for long, and soon I'd have some weather to contend with. As I rose in elevation, so did the depth of the snow. I was headed for the infamous Donner Pass. The temps dropped into the 30-degree Fahrenheit zone. And then the snow began to fall. I wondered if I'd be spending the night on the pass. I stopped at the snowy, wet summit for gas, and fortunately the weather didn't thwart my passage to the other side. If I was going to make it to Winnemucca before nightfall, it was time to put the hammer down. But it didn't help that either this truck driver was distracted or just thought he'd use both lanes. There was no look of apology or sorry on his face or lips. It just goes to show that one needs to be on one's game. But fatigue was starting to set in. I wasn't sure if Winnemucca was within reach. As the grade began leveling out, and I knew I wasn't far from Reno, I figured I could do Winnemucca. Whether a motel room would be available was another story. Once on the flats, the last slog to Winnemucca seemed to take forever. Weary from the day's ride, I did make it to town. Now it was time to search for a place to lay my head. I thought I should find a nicer motel and spoil myself a little. The Best Western looked like just the place. But boy, I wasn't ready for either the cost of the room or the fact that there were no rooms for the taking. So it was on to the less posh Econo Lodge. They had a room, it had a bed and a hot shower. At this point, it was all I cared about. Supper consisted of a few bites of jerky and some water. After a call home and a conversation with my wife, I laid down for what I'd hoped would be a restful sleep. That wasn't to be. About 3 in the morning, I could hear heavy footsteps from the room above me, followed by two idiots starting their diesel pickups and letting them idle for what seemed like an eternity. Once awakened, I usually can't go back to sleep. So I got up, suited up, loaded up the bike, and set off in the cold, dark desert morning. I was going home. After gassing up, I set off in the direction I thought was north. I realized 6 miles down the road that in fact I was headed not north, but east. So, turning around, I retraced my route back to US 95. I was glad I'd brought an extra layer of clothing and thankful for my heated seat and grips. It gets damned cold in the desert.
Well, the temp on the dash says 32.5 degrees Fahrenheit, and I sure wish my electric gloves would have worked. But alas, they didn't. Good thing I got heated grips. That helps a little bit.
Heated grips or no, I was certainly ready for the rising sun to warm things up. A hot cup of coffee would have been nice at this point, but there isn't much out here on this lonely stretch of Highway 95. Ever so gradually, the temperature did rise, but I had a long way to go before shaking off the chill. The rising glow over the hilltops was a welcome sight. One of my intended stops was Pacific Power Sports in Ontario, Oregon. It's the U.S. distributorship for the Australian company's Moto's tires, where our company, All Moto Tire, procures this particular brand of adventure tire. Realizing how long it had been since I'd had anything to eat, I stopped in Ontario for a proper meal. After ordering and consuming the full Monty, steak, potatoes, eggs, toast, the whole lot, my GPS led me to a rather unassuming building in a semi industrial part of the town. I was greeted by a very friendly employee, and we talked about a flaw in my rear tractionator GPS tire. She took pictures and assured me that they'd send a new tire on my next order. After chatting for a while, I was given a tour of the building. Heaven for a longtime tire geek like me. If I was going to make the miles, however, I needed to get back on the road. It was some 450 miles to the home 20, and I hadn't decided where I'd be this night. It all depended on how much gas I had left in the tank. Not the KTM's tank, mine. Crazy as it would seem, my brain just kept telling me to push forward. And so I did. Up through Whitebird and Grangeville, Idaho, and onto Highway 12 and Lolo Pass. It was going to be a long day.
Fayette, Idaho. I haven't been here since I was a little boy, about 7 years old. My sister, Joanne, was a bridesmaid for one of her teachers in junior high. And we came all the way down here from Western Washington to attend the wedding. And along the way, somewhere close to Fayette, we stopped at a little cafe. And I had a very, very cold Nesbitt's orange soda in a frosted glass. And I drank that thing down just like nothing. And probably about an hour later, I was heaving my guts out, and I stayed that way for about 2 days. So I spent my time in the motel room. Not a pleasant memory from Fayette.
I still shudder when I recall that family trip. The nearly triple digit heat, consuming that Nesbitt's orange soda, and then talking to the porcelain gods for 2 days. And yes, I did miss the wedding. And the miles kept clicking by.
Welcome to New Meadows, Idaho.
Now that I was on Highway 12 and heading for Lolo Pass, I was buoyed up by the fact that I was nearly back in Montana. I thought, I think I can make it home. It's 132 miles from Kuski, Idaho to Lolo, Montana, and it's a marvelous motorcycle ride. The relatively low 50 mile per hour speed limit and the stringent enforcement along the way make the ride seem longer than it is. At this point, I just wanted to be home. The pace was agonizing. I managed to keep my speed down to a reasonable level, although as I drew near the summit and the Montana border, an Idaho County Sheriff deputy passing in the other direction had his hand out the window motioning me to slow down. Looking down at my dash, I could see that I was exceeding the limit by a whopping 4 miles per hour. Did I mention they're strict in this part of the state?
We made it to Lolo Pass. We're going to be in Montana before you know it, unless the gendarme decides otherwise. I've spotted a few already. We're close to the summit.
I love seeing new places, riding the bike, and meeting nice folks. But it's always a great feeling knowing that I live in such a beautiful part of the world. Once I reached the summit, I knew the last 3 hours or so would be doable.
Back on mountain time.
And as a bonus to crossing state lines, the increased Montana speed limits made for more spirited riding, shall we say. As always, Getting through Missoula traffic to I-90 was a pain, but once back on the final Highway 93 push north, I somehow felt energized. I could still feel the hundreds of miles of saddle time on my backside, but like Dad used to say, you can stand on your head in hell if you have to.
Well, we get to do a little off-roading here. We got the road all torn up at Ronan.
Ah, the springtime road construction. Gotta love it. Through Ronan and Polson until the beautiful Flathead Lake comes into view.
And there, my friends, is my beloved Flathead Lake. It's a happy sight.
Just over about 1 hour to go. I'd be sleeping in my own bed tonight. Cruising up the east side of Flathead Lake, I was treated to a beautiful sunset. Happy to be so close to home. With the evening light fading, the Swan Mountains were gorgeous. It was an extremely long day. When I finally arrived in my driveway, I'd clocked just over 700 miles. That was okay. I'd be back in the comforts of my own home and reunited with Debbie and the Pooches. I'm glad to have made the trip with my friend Dan, and I got to hang out with my brother from another mother, Mark. This wouldn't be the last longish ride of the season, so be sure to visit this channel again. Fuzzy side up, rubber side down, my friends. Brought to you by